I stared at the mahogany conference table where my family sat, their faces a mixture of smugness and anticipation. The downtown Chicago skyline stretched behind them through floor-to-ceiling windows, a view I'd grown up seeing from this 45-floor office. Now at 28, I was about to change everything they thought they knew about their precious real estate empire. 24 hours, my older sister Margaret declared, tapping her manicured nails on the polished wood. That's generous considering the circumstances. Our father, still commanding in his 70s, nodded in agreement. You've brought shame to this family. The least you can do is leave quietly. My mother dabbed at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, ever the picture of wounded dignity. The same act she'd perfected through 3 decades of social climbing and corporate acquisitions. I remained standing, my hands steady as I placed my laptop on the table. Before I go, I'd like to show you something. We're not interested in your excuses, my brother-in-law Richard sneered. He'd married into the family 15 years ago and had been undermining me ever since. It's not an excuse, I said calmly, opening my computer. It's a deed. The word hung in the air like smoke. My father's eyes narrowed. What deed? To this building and the other 15 properties in the downtown portfolio. I turned the screen to face them. As of 8 a.m. this morning, I own controlling interest in Hamilton Properties. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the usual hum of downtown Chicago seemed muted, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Margaret recovered first, her laugh sharp and dismissive. That's impossible. The trust doesn't mature until you're 35. The trust you know about doesn't, I agreed. But grandfather's original trust, the one Dad thought he'd buried in shell companies and offshore accounts, that one matured when I turned 25. Dad's face went pale. How did you find it? I smiled, thinking of the past 6 years of careful investigation. I learned from the best, Dad. You taught me to always look deeper, follow the money. So I did. I pulled up another document. 3 years ago, when you were trying to force me out of the company the first time, I started tracing grandfather's original holdings. It took time, but eventually I found the trail. The real estate portfolio he built, the one you borrowed against to start Hamilton Properties, it was never meant to be yours. My mother's hand flew to her throat, clutching her pearls. That's a lie. Your father inherited everything when his father died. Actually, I pulled up the original trust document. Grandfather left the portfolio in trust for his first grandchild. That's me. You got the liquid assets, Dad, but the real estate was always meant to be mine. Richard stood up, his face red. This is ridiculous. You can't just walk in here with some fabricated documents. They're not fabricated, a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Harrison Wells, the family's longtime attorney, walking in with a thick folder. I've spent the last month verifying everything. The documents are genuine. Dad's hands clenched into fists. You knew about this. I received notification when the trust activated 3 years ago, Harrison admitted. By then, your daughter had already begun her own investigation. I was legally bound to assist her once she made contact. I thought back to that first meeting with Harrison, how nervous I'd been walking into his office with my initial findings. He'd listened patiently, then opened his safe and pulled out the very documents I'd spent years searching for. Why didn't you tell me? Dad demanded. Harrison met his gaze steadily. Because your father made me promise not to. He knew what you'd do with the properties if you had full control. The trust was his way of ensuring his legacy would be preserved. Preserved? Margaret scoffed. We've turned Hamilton Properties into one of the largest real estate firms in the Midwest. By leveraging everything to build luxury developments, I pointed out. Tearing down historic buildings, forcing out local businesses, pricing long-term residents out of their neighborhoods. Everything grandfather fought against. I opened another file on my laptop. These are the original covenants he placed on the properties: affordable housing requirements, small business protections, community investment mandates, all the things you've been ignoring for 20 years. My mother stood up, her composure cracking. You ungrateful child. After everything we've done for you, done for me. I laughed without humor. You mean like forcing me to work maintenance jobs in our buildings because I needed to learn respect, or blocking every proposal I brought to the board? Or maybe you mean this latest plan to force me out completely. You weren't ready for responsibility. Dad insisted. You needed to learn. I learned exactly what you taught me. I cut him off. I learned how to investigate thoroughly, how to keep my plans quiet, and how to strike at the perfect moment. I learned from watching you destroy grandfather's legacy piece by piece. I clicked to another document. This is my first act as controlling owner. I'm reversing the eviction notices for the Harrison Street apartments. Richard jumped up. You can't do that. We have developers lined up. Not anymore. I met his glare steadily. I've spent the last year meeting with every tenant, every small business owner. They're staying and their rents are rolling back to sustainable levels. You'll bankrupt us. Margaret hissed. No, I corrected her. I'll restore us to what we should have been all along. A company that builds communities, not just profits. Harrison cleared his throat. There's more they need to know. I nodded, pulling up the final document. This is a forensic audit of Hamilton Properties books for the past 15 years. The creative accounting, the hidden fees, the consulting payments to shell companies. It's all here. The color drained from Richard's face. Margaret grabbed his arm, while my mother sank back into her chair. I'm not pressing charges, I continued. Instead, I'm offering you all a choice. You can stay with the company, keep your positions, but under new terms. Complete transparency, fair practices, and a return to grandfather's original vision. Or you can leave, with reasonable severance packages and non-disclosure agreements. Dad stood up slowly, his authority visibly crumbling. You planned this whole thing, the maintenance jobs, the failed proposals. You wanted us to underestimate you. I learned from the best, I repeated. You taught me that the person everyone ignores is the one who sees everything. So yes, I spent 6 years working my way through every property we own, learning every detail, meeting every tenant. While you were all focused on luxury penthouses and golf club memberships, I was building relationships with the people who actually make these buildings work. I turned to Harrison. Please distribute the employment contracts. Everyone has 24 hours to decide, just like you gave me. As Harrison handed out the folders, I packed up my laptop. The stunned silence in the room was broken only by the rustle of papers and my mother's quiet sobs. One more thing, I said, pausing at the door. The maintenance staff is getting raises, effective immediately. Carlos in Building 7 has been working 60-hour weeks to support his family. Maria in Building 12 is putting her daughter through college. They're the heart of this company, and it's time we treated them that way. You'll regret this, Margaret called after me. You have no idea how to run a company this size. I turned back one last time. Actually, I do. Because unlike you, I've done every job in it. Check your emails. You'll find detailed proposals for every change I'm implementing, complete with financial projections and community impact assessments. I've spent 6 years planning this. Trust me, I'm ready. The elevator ride to the ground floor gave me time to breathe, to let the adrenaline fade. As I walked through the lobby, nodding to Sam the security guard, who taught me everything about building safety protocols, I felt lighter than I had in years. My phone buzzed. Harrison sending confirmation that the contracts had been distributed. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, looking up at the building that had been my family's crown jewel and was now my responsibility. A text from Carlos. Is it true? The raises. Yes, I replied. Meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. to discuss all the changes. We knew you were different, he texted back. Ever since you helped fix Mrs. Rodriguez's heating in the middle of that snowstorm. I smiled, remembering that night 3 years ago. While my family had been at a charity gala, I'd spent hours with Carlos fixing the heating system in an elderly tenant's apartment. That was when I'd first seen the maintenance logs that led me to discover the systematic neglect of our properties. Another text, this one from Maria. The whole staff is talking. Is it really you in charge now? It really is, and we have work to do. My phone kept buzzing, with messages from staff members across all 16 buildings. People I'd worked alongside, learned from, built relationships with, while my family assumed I was simply failing to live up to their expectations. I walked to the coffee shop across the street, one of the small businesses my family had been trying to force out. Annie, the owner, waved me over. Just heard the news. She grinned. sliding my usual order across the counter. Does this mean we can finally sign that long-term lease we talked about? Draw up the paperwork, I told her, and start planning that expansion you wanted. This block is staying exactly what it should be, a real community. As I sat by the window, watching the flow of people in and out of our buildings, I thought about my grandfather. I'd only known him for 7 years before he died, but I remembered how he used to walk these streets, greeting everyone by name, asking about their families, their businesses, their dreams. My phone rang, Dad's number. I let it go to voicemail. He'd have his chance to talk tomorrow, once he'd read through the contracts, and realized that I was offering a chance for redemption, not revenge. A mother and daughter walked past the window, carrying groceries into Building 3. I'd helped them move in 2 years ago, while working as a porter. The daughter had just started college on a scholarship, the same program my family had tried to cut from the community outreach budget. My laptop pinged with an email notification. The first resignation had arrived, Richard predictably. He'd rather leave than work under new rules. Oh. That was fine. I already had a replacement in mind, the tenant from Building 9, who'd been running a successful small business consulting firm from her apartment. Another text from Harrison. Your grandfather would be proud. I took a sip of coffee, watching the sun set behind our buildings. Tomorrow would bring challenges, reorganizing the company, implementing new policies, dealing with my family's reactions. But for now, I savored this moment. They'd given me 24 hours to leave, never imagining I'd spent the last 6 years preparing to stay. They'd dismissed me as a failure, never seeing that I was learning every aspect of the business they took for granted. They tried to force me out, never realizing they were giving me exactly what I needed, the motivation to rebuild everything from the ground up. Annie brought over a fresh coffee. On the house, boss. Something tells me you're going to need it. Thanks, Annie. I pulled out my tablet, starting to review the next day's agenda. And I'm not your boss. I'm your neighbor. Always have been. Always will be. She smiled, understanding the difference. In that case, want to hear what the other business owners on the block are saying about all this? I gestured to the chair across from me. Tell me everything. That's how we're going to run things from now on, by listening to the people who make this community work. As Annie sat down and began sharing the hopes and concerns of our neighbors, I felt the weight of my grandfather's legacy settling comfortably on my shoulders. He trusted me to see what my family had forgotten, that real estate isn't just about buildings and profits, it's about people, communities, and the simple dignity of having a place to call home. The next morning, I arrived at Hamilton Properties headquarters at 6 a.m., well before the usual executive start time. The cleaning crew was surprised to see me, or rather surprised to see me in a suit instead of maintenance coveralls. Miss Hamilton, Maria from the night cleaning staff gasped. We heard rumors, but everything's true, I assured her. And your contract review is my first meeting today. How's your son's asthma? She blinked, touched that I remembered. Better, but the medications. Check your email. The new healthcare plan is already in effect. I touched her arm gently. No more choosing between rent and prescriptions. The news spread quickly through the early morning shift workers. By the time I reached my grandfather's old office, my office now, word had traveled through all 16 buildings that the changes were real. Harrison was waiting for me, looking remarkably fresh for someone who'd probably been up all night handling legal documents. 4 resignations so far, he reported. Richard, obviously, 2 VPs from Margaret's division, and your mother's personal assistant. The assistant was expected. I nodded, setting up my laptop. She's been helping Mom hide unauthorized expenses for years. Have security start their exit protocols. Already done, but there's something else you should see. He handed me a tablet. Your father's been making calls since 3 a.m. I scanned the call log. Major developers, bank executives, city officials, all the power players he'd cultivated over the years. He's trying to block our refinancing plans. Yes, but here's what he doesn't know. Harrison smiled slightly. I've spent the last year quietly meeting with smaller banks, community development organizations, and ethical investment funds. We don't need his connections anymore. What about the mayor's office? I asked, noting several calls to City Hall. Already handled. Remember Jason from Building 4, the law student you helped with housing assistance 3 years ago? He's been interning with the city's housing department. He made sure our community development proposals reached the right people. I smiled, remembering the late nights helping Jason study for his LCEC, the building's common room. Have our HR team contact him. We'll need good lawyers who understand community housing law. The morning sun was just touching the Chicago skyline when my phone buzzed. Margaret, right on schedule. The board won't stand for this, she started without preamble. The board doesn't have a choice, I replied calmly. Check Section 4 of the trust documents. Grandfather gave controlling interest to his first grandchild, me. The board serves at my discretion. You're making a mistake, she hissed. These bleeding heart policies will destroy everything we've built. No, they'll rebuild everything you destroyed. The meeting's at 9 a.m. Your new contract will be waiting. I hung up as my tablet chimed with an incoming video call from Carlos, our head of maintenance. Miss Hamilton, you need to see this. Your brother-in-law Richard is in Building 7, removing files from his office. Send security, I instructed. And Carlos, it's still just Sarah to you. By 8:30 a.m., the executive floor was buzzing with activity. Staff members who'd never seen me in anything but work clothes did double takes as I walked past. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, professional but not ostentatious, approachable but authoritative. The conference room filled slowly. My father arrived first, looking like he hadn't slept. Mom came next, her usual perfect appearance slightly strained. Margaret slipped in just before 9, avoiding everyone's eyes. Several board members followed, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. At exactly 9 a.m., I stood at the head of the table, the same spot where they'd tried to force me out 24 hours ago. Thank you all for coming, I began. You've had time to review the documents. Here's how today will work. I'll present our new corporate structure and policies. Then those who wish to stay will sign their contracts. Those who don't will meet with HR to discuss their exit packages. This is absurd, one board member interrupted. You can't possibly. Actually, she can, Harrison interjected, displaying the trust documents on the room's screen. Miss Hamilton has full legal authority to implement these changes. I continued as if there hadn't been an interruption. Our first priority is stabilizing our residential communities. All planned evictions are canceled. Rent increases will be capped at 3% annually for existing tenants. Small business leases will be reviewed and adjusted to sustainable levels. We'll lose millions, Margaret protested. No, I corrected her, pulling up my projections. We'll save millions. Our maintenance costs will drop because stable communities take better care of their homes. Our vacancy rates will decrease because people can afford to stay. Our legal expenses will plummet because we won't be fighting our own tenants. I clicked to the next. Additionally, we're implementing comprehensive staff benefits, starting with the maintenance and cleaning crews, living wages, health insurance, educational assistance. Happy employees mean better service, lower turnover, and reduced training costs. This isn't what this company stands for, Dad said quietly. No, it's what it stood for originally. I met his eyes. I found Grandfather's original business plans. Everything I'm proposing. He wrote it 30 years ago, before you convinced him that luxury development was the only way forward. Mom stirred. Your grandfather changed his mind. He saw that we needed to grow. No. Harrison spoke up. He didn't. That's why he created the trust. He knew his son had different values, but he hoped his grandchild might remember what Hamilton Properties was meant to be. I picked up a stack of contracts. You all have a choice to make. Those who stay will need to embrace our new direction completely. No more hidden fees. No more forcing out long-term tenants. No more ignoring maintenance issues in affordable units while renovating penthouses. And if we refuse, Margaret asked, then you'll receive fair compensation for your shares and a reasonable severance package. But you'll also sign non-disclosure and non-compete agreements. What happened in this company stays private, as long as you do. The room was silent as I distributed the contracts. Take an hour to review everything. Those who are staying, sign and return them to Harrison. Those who are leaving, HR is set up in the East Conference Room. I turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. I know some of you are wondering how I learned the business well enough to run it. The answer is simple. I worked every job you thought was beneath you. I learned from the people you ignored. Remember that before you decide. The next hour was busy. Security reported that they'd caught Richard trying to delete files from the company's servers, exactly as I'd expected. Our IT team, led by a brilliant programmer I'd met while fixing the Building 12 security system, had already backed up everything. Carlos called again. The maintenance team meeting is ready when you are. And Sarah, we're all with you on this. I headed down to the maintenance office, my old workplace. 30 faces looked back at me, people I'd worked alongside for years while my family thought I was failing at my punishment assignments. Nothing changes with how we work together, I told them. Except now you'll be paid what you're worth, with the benefits you deserve. And when you tell me something needs fixing, it gets fixed. A cheer went up, the first genuine celebration of the day. These were my people, the ones who really kept Hamilton Properties running. They'd taught me everything my family hadn't bothered to learn about our buildings and our tenants. By the time I returned upstairs, Harrison had the results. 6 board members had resigned, including 2 of my father's oldest allies. Margaret had signed her contract, though her expression promised future challenges. Mom had signed too, probably more to save face than from genuine acceptance. And Dad, I found him in his office, my grandfather's office, staring out at the city. I signed, he said without turning around. Not because I agree with you, but because I want to understand. Understand what? How I missed it, how I never saw what you were doing, what you were learning. He finally faced me. You were right there, right under my nose, building relationships with every employee, every tenant, creating the support network I thought I had. You saw what you expected to see, I said quietly. A disappointing daughter who couldn't live up to the family name. It never occurred to you that I was living up to a different Hamilton legacy, grandfather's. He picked up a photo from his desk, him and grandfather at a building opening 30 years ago. He tried to tell me, that real estate wasn't just about property values and profit margins. I thought I knew better. You can learn, I offered, if you're willing to listen to the people who actually make these buildings work, like you did. Exactly like I did. I moved to the window beside him. Starting tomorrow, you're going to work with Carlos and his team for a week. Learn what maintenance really involves, what our tenants really need. Then a week with Annie and the small business owners. After that, we'll talk about your role going forward. He stared at me. You're demoting me. I'm teaching you, I corrected. The same way this building taught me, from the ground up. 3 months after taking control of Hamilton Properties, I sat in what was now officially my office, reviewing the first quarter results. The numbers told a story my family had never expected: occupancy rates up 12%, maintenance costs down 23%, and community satisfaction scores at record highs. A knock at my door revealed Harrison with his morning briefing. The press is calling it the Hamilton Revolution, he reported, sliding a tablet across my desk. Business schools are already writing case studies. I scanned the headlines: Real Estate Empire's Radical Transformation, How One Heiress Chose Community Over Luxury, and my personal favorite, The Secret Boss, 6 years undercover in her own company. How's the family adjusting? Harrison asked, taking a seat. I pulled up the internal reports. Dad's finishing his 3rd week of ground-level training. Carlos says he's actually listening now. Yesterday he spent 4 hours helping fix the elevator in Building 3. And Margaret, surprisingly well. Turns out she's good at community outreach when she's not trying to price people out of their homes. The small business development program was her idea. Harrison smiled. And your mother? Still struggling with the concept of affordable luxury, but she's trying. She's reorganizing the social events to include all residents, not just the penthouse crowd. My phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. Emergency meeting needed. Building 7 situation. Got to go. I told Harrison, real work calls. I headed down to the maintenance office, where I found Carlos with my father, both looking concerned over building plans. The foundation issue is worse than we thought. Carlos explained. Previous management ignored it for years. Dad spoke up, his hands dirty from recent maintenance work. I remember these reports. I dismissed them because fixing it would have delayed the luxury renovations. And now? I asked him. He straightened up. Now we need to evacuate the east wing immediately and start repairs before it becomes dangerous. I already called the structural engineers. I nodded, proud of his new priorities. Cost estimate, 3 million minimum, Carlos said. But we can't delay, agreed. Start the evacuation protocol. Dad, work with Margaret to arrange temporary housing for affected residents. Use the empty units in Building 4. The luxury units, he asked, surprised. Those rent for doesn't matter, I cut him off. Our residents need safe housing. Make it happen. As they left to begin preparations, I received another text, this one from Annie at the coffee shop. Community Council meeting in an hour. Big turnout expected. The Community Council was another new initiative, monthly meetings where residents and business owners could voice concerns and suggestions directly to management. Today's would be interesting. I arrived at the Building 7 community room to find it packed. Annie had saved me a seat next to Maria, who was still getting used to seeing her former maintenance supervisor in business attire. First order of business, Annie announced, standing at the podium we'd installed for these meetings. The foundation repairs. I stood up. We're beginning emergency evacuations today. All affected residents will be temporarily relocated to Building 4 at no additional cost. Repairs will start immediately. A murmur went through the crowd, not of protest, but of surprise at the swift action. Under the old management, such issues would have been buried in paperwork for months. Second item. Annie continued. The Small Business Incubator Program. Margaret stepped forward, looking professional but approachable in business casual attire. We've secured funding for the first 10 applicants. Priority goes to existing residents who want to start businesses within our properties. I watched my sister work the room, explaining the program with genuine enthusiasm. The same skills she'd once used to court luxury clients were now being used to build community partnerships. The meeting continued, addressing everything from after-school programs to green energy initiatives. When it ended, I found myself cornered by Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly tenant whose heating problem had first led me to discover the maintenance issues 3 years ago. Your grandfather would be so proud, she said, patting my hand. He used to come to my restaurant before your father closed it. He always said buildings were about people, not profits. I remember that restaurant, I smiled. Best empanadas in Chicago. Well, she glanced at Margaret, who was nearby. Your sister suggested I might qualify for the business incubator program. Maybe it's time those empanadas came back. Later that afternoon, I had another surprise visitor to my office. My mother, carrying blueprints. I've been thinking, she said, spreading them out. We have all these empty penthouses that were supposed to be luxury units. What if we converted them into community spaces, daycare centers, study areas, meeting rooms? I studied the plans, noting her attention to detail. You've put a lot of work into this. I have. She hesitated. I've been talking to the residents. Really talking, not just making small talk at charity events. They need these spaces more than we need more empty penthouses. What about your social circle? Won't they talk? She straightened her shoulders. Let them. I'm finding I prefer real conversations with our residents to fake smiles at cocktail parties. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with an alert. One of our biggest luxury competitors was running ads targeting our diminished exclusivity. Send it to marketing. Mom suggested. Margaret has some ideas about redefining luxury as community strength rather than social isolation. I looked at my mother, really looked at her. The perfectly maintained facade was still there, but something had changed behind her eyes. She was engaged, energized, actually interested in the work rather than just the status it brought. You're enjoying this, I realized. I am, she admitted. Your father and I, we lost sight of what mattered. We taught you kids that success meant pushing others down to lift ourselves up. But this, She gestured to the blueprints. This feels like real success. A knock interrupted us. Dad and Carlos, fresh from the Building 7 evacuation. Everyone's safely relocated, Dad reported. And Sarah, you should see this. He handed me his tablet, showing photos of luxury unit residents, helping their neighbors move, sharing meals, offering storage space. Community forming naturally, once artificial barriers were removed. I remember when we first bought these buildings. Dad said quietly. Before we started segregating by income, before we decided luxury was more important than community. It felt like this. Carlos spoke up. The maintenance team wanted you to know, whatever you need for the repairs, we're ready. Everyone's offering to work extra shifts to get it done faster. Speaking of the maintenance team, I said, how's their new supervisor working out? Carlos grinned. Your father. He's actually pretty good, now that he understands what we really do. Yesterday he spent 2 hours teaching the new guys about building systems. Dad looked embarrassed, but pleased. I'm learning more from them than they are from me. My phone buzzed again. Harrison with the final numbers from the Building 7 evacuation. I'd expected resistance from the luxury unit residents about sharing their space. Instead, they were organizing welcome dinners for their temporary neighbors. Send these numbers to Margaret, I told him. She's rewriting our marketing strategy around community integration. And contact Mrs. Rodriguez. We're going to need catering for these welcome dinners. As my family dispersed to their various tasks, all at ground level now, all involving real work with real people, I thought about how much had changed in 3 months. The Hamilton Revolution wasn't just about business practices, it was about transforming how we define success. My grandfather had known this would happen. The trust wasn't just about preserving his legacy, it was about giving his family a chance to rediscover what really mattered. He'd known that his first grandchild, growing up watching the damage caused by prioritizing profit over people, might choose a different path. A final text came through from Annie. Community dinner tonight, in Building 7. Your dad's bringing his famous chili. Your mom's actually helping in the kitchen. You coming? Wouldn't miss it, I replied, closing my laptop. As I headed down to join my family, my real family, including every resident and employee who'd helped me learn how to run this company the right way. My grandfather's face smiled out from them, and I could almost hear his voice. Buildings are just structures. It's the people inside them that matter. 1 year after taking control of Hamilton Properties, I stood in the renovated lobby of Building 7, watching as residents gathered for what had become a monthly tradition, the community dinner. My father was manning the chili station, chatting easily with tenants he once would have considered beneath his notice. Mom was arranging flowers with Maria's daughter, who'd just started a floristry business through our incubator program. Hard to believe it's been a year, Harrison said, joining me with his ever-present tablet. The numbers for the annual report are ready. I glanced at the figures: occupancy rates stable at 98%, maintenance costs reduced by 40%, and community businesses thriving. But the most telling statistic was the waiting list. Over 2,000 people hoping to join what the press now called the Hamilton Community Model. The expansion proposals are ready too, he added. 5 cities want to replicate our system, including the Carter Group merger, I asked, referring to our biggest former competitor. They're ready to adopt our full model. Turns out diminished exclusivity is actually good for business when it creates stable, thriving communities. Margaret approached, looking satisfied. The documentary crew is set up in the community room. They want to interview the family about the transformation. All of us? I asked, surprised. They specifically requested Dad. Apparently the story of a real estate tycoon learning to fix his own buildings is pretty compelling. I looked over at our father, who was now demonstrating proper stove maintenance to a group of interested residents. The past year had changed him more than any of us. 3 months into his ground-level training, he'd asked to permanently oversee maintenance operations, saying he'd finally found meaningful work. The community room had been transformed into a recording studio. Mrs. Rodriguez's new restaurant, Abuela's, had catered the event, and the smell of her famous empanadas filled the air. The documentary director gathered us together, me, my parents, Margaret, Carlos, Annie, and several long-term residents. We want to tell the story of how Hamilton Properties revolutionized urban living, she explained. Starting with the moment everything changed. Mom spoke first, surprising us all. It changed the moment we stopped seeing our residents as sources of revenue and started seeing them as neighbors. My daughter taught us that. By working alongside them, Dad added. While we were focused on luxury amenities, Sarah was learning what our communities really needed. She did every job we thought was beneath us, and in doing so she discovered what Hamilton Properties could truly become. Margaret leaned forward. We thought we were punishing her with those maintenance assignments. Instead, she was building the relationships and knowledge that would transform our entire approach to real estate. The director turned to me. And what made you choose this path? I thought about that morning a year ago, standing in the conference room with my family's ultimatum hanging in the air. I remembered something my grandfather once told me. He said that buildings are like living things. They thrive when every part is valued and cared for. The same is true for communities. Tell us about the changes, the director prompted. We stopped treating our properties as assets to be maximized and started seeing them as ecosystems to be nurtured. I explained. Every decision now goes through our community council. Every renovation considers its impact on existing residents. Every new business initiative prioritizes local entrepreneurs. Carlos jumped in. The maintenance team isn't just fixing problems anymore. We're preventing them. Because now we have the resources and authority to do things right. And the luxury market, the director asked. Your competitors predicted you'd lose the high-end clientele. Annie answered that one. Actually, we've gained clients. Turns out real luxury isn't about excluding others. It's about being part of a vibrant, caring community. Our residents at all income levels know their neighbors. They look out for each other. That's worth more than any marble lobby. The interview continued, telling the story of our transformation. The failed eviction attempts that became community preservation initiatives. The empty penthouses converted into shared spaces. The maintenance staff promoted to management positions based on their actual knowledge of the buildings. After the crew finished, we joined the community dinner in full swing. Looking around, it was hard to tell who was who anymore. Residents from different income levels mingled freely, former executives chatted with maintenance workers, and children played together regardless of which floor their parents lived on. Miss Hamilton, a voice called. It was Jason, the former law student, now our head of legal affairs. The community land trust documents are ready for review. This was our next big step, transferring portions of our properties into community ownership, ensuring long-term affordability while maintaining quality. Another of my grandfather's original ideas, finally being implemented. Send them to Harrison, I told him. And Jason, great work on the expansion contracts. The other cities are impressed. Mom appeared at my elbow. The Carter Group CEO is here. She'd like to discuss accelerating the merger. I found Mrs. Carter by the dessert table, sampling Mrs. Rodriguez's flan. This is extraordinary, she said, gesturing around the room. A year ago I thought you were destroying your family's legacy. Now I realize you were fulfilling it. It wasn't just me, I replied. Every person in this room contributed to this transformation. We just had to give them the chance. That's why I want to speed up the merger, she said. My properties, they feel dead compared to this. I want what you've built here. It takes work, I warned her. Real work at every level. Are you ready to learn from your maintenance staff? To listen to your residents? To put community before profit? Teach me, she said simply. Later that evening, as the dinner wound down, I found myself back in my grandfather's old office. My office now, though I spent most of my time in the buildings with our residents. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows, and I could see similar community dinners happening in our other properties across downtown. Dad knocked softly before entering. Got a minute? Always, he joined me at the window. I owe you an apology. All those years, we thought we were teaching you about real estate. Instead, you were teaching us what real estate should be about. We all learned together, I said. That's how communities work. Your grandfather knew, he smiled. That trust wasn't just about property ownership. It was about trusting the next generation to find a better way. My phone buzzed. A message from the maintenance team in Building 12. One of our elderly residents needed help with her groceries, and they were organizing a volunteer system to assist her. Want to help set up the volunteer schedule? I asked Dad. Wouldn't miss it, he replied. But first you should see this. He handed me an old photograph I'd never seen before. It showed my grandfather standing in front of Building 7, surrounded by a diverse group of residents, at what looked like a community dinner, circa 1980. He called it his real estate family. Dad said quietly, I forgot that part, but you remembered it somehow. You brought his dream back to life. Together we headed down to help our neighbors. Knowing that all of this, was what success really looked like. Not in balance sheets or luxury amenities, but in the strength of a community where everyone had a place, everyone had a voice, and everyone mattered. The Hamilton Revolution wasn't just about changing how we managed buildings. It was about remembering what buildings were meant to be. Homes where communities could grow, businesses could thrive, and people could build better lives together. The end.